Welcome back, everybody. In this episode, we got to sit down with Dr. Mike Simpson for his second appearance on the Street Tales podcast. In this one, my co-host was Mo, as we dove into a little bit more of the law enforcement training that he is still doing, currently doing. But Dr. Mike Simpson, he's kind of hard to put your finger on. He has a military career that spans 32 years, airborne ranger, special forces operator, also an emergency medicine doctor, all at the same time. He had many tours of combat, and he now trains and helps teach the next generation in law enforcement on TAC medicine, different things like that. We dive into that on this episode. He's also a published author. His first book, Honed, sold over 10,000 copies. He's also published last year the first of a trilogy called The Last Dungeon Crawler, a fiction novel, and he's working on completing book 2 of the trilogy, Tears of the Dragon. All of these links will be in the description below. But what I love about Dr. Simpson is, even with all his pedigree, he's always willing to, one, humble himself on things he doesn't know, learn, but he is driven to help pass on and educate the next generation with the knowledge that he has. He talks about seeking to better the world through education. He has dedicated himself to sharing his knowledge and experience with all who seek to improve themselves. And one of my favorite quotes with Doc Simpson is, he is highly trained to take life and highly trained to bring back life. So if you really piss him off, he'll take your life, bring you back just so he could take it again. I hope you enjoy this episode with Doc Simpson. Dr. Mike, I'm happy to have you back, brother.
Happy to be back.
Absolutely. I've got you with Mo. Just a number of reasons, but this is hopefully going to be a little bit more geared towards law enforcement, the training. We kind of alluded to it in your first episode. There's just a lot to cover. Again, I don't try to necessarily make each one of these episodes like an autobiography, but even just the snippets that we got, it's just, there's so much experience and stuff to dive into that I really appreciate you coming back. So I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me, man.
Perfect. And if you don't mind, I know we did this in the first episode. Can you just give a little snippet of, I love where you're from, how you got to where you are, and then we're gonna move in. We did cover it in the first episode, but just kind of reiterate.
Sure. My name is Mike Simpson. I'm a doctor of emergency medicine. I retired from the United States Army in 2016. I had a 32-year career, 17 of that as an operator in the SOF community, then went to med school and residency, went back to the SOF community, and I served in a Tier 1 SMU for 6 years, did 5 deployments with them overseas. And I now live in Texas, and I continue to practice medicine. And I'm a SWAT physician with the local SWAT team. And I also have a little bit less of a role than I used to, but I also still technically have a role on the state level as well.
So, a couple questions. What is a SWAT physician, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so that is a really great question, because if you ask 100 SWAT physicians that same question, you're going to get 200 answers.
Yeah.
Nobody can give you a straight answer.
Yeah.
So it's so when I use the term SWAT physician, but probably some people say tactical physician, some people say medical director. Basically what my job is to come up with a plan for what level the operators should be trained and what their scope of practice is as non-medical professionals.
Yep. And
also do the same for the SWAT medics, whether they're EMT basics or, intermediates, advanced, or paramedics. So to come up with basically the framework for what they can do within the scope of medical practice and how they're going to be proficient in that through training, how often that training is going to occur, what the standards are, how they're going to be appropriately graded. A lot of that can be done for you because, obviously there's Alert, there's NTOA, there's all the other, TECC, there's all these other organizations out there that you can use as resources. But at the end of the day, as medical director, it's my signature that goes on that. So if an officer does something, or if one of my medics does something and this gets called into a medical legal question later on, that's what ultimately is going to be referred to.
Is this something that's in every state or every agency that has SWAT? Because honestly, I've known SWAT medics, I guess is what we called them. But what you're describing seems a little bit more than what I've been exposed to.
Well, anybody who's operating as a medic, there's no such thing as a medic who's operating without some type of medical supervision. There's somewhere, if you go down the rabbit hole, there's a physician whose license they are practicing under.
Got it.
And depending from municipality to municipality, that might be a little bit different. Some places they're drawn directly from local EMS. Some places, like the team that I primarily work with is a composite team. So we have police officers from 4 different organizations, and we have medics from 3 different organizations all working together. So in that case, they're all technically working on a day-to-day basis under somebody else's medical license. So I kind of provide them an umbrella for, okay, when you're not in the box and you're not wearing your navy blue cargo pants and you're wearing camouflage and you're wearing body armor, this is how you're going to practice a little bit differently. So I'm not paid by any organization or by the government. So this is all, at least in my case, is done with a memorandum of understanding through myself and all the different, and literally all the organizations that are involved.
I'm trying not to bombard you with questions. I'm trying to be very strategic in it. Do you train these SWAT medics, or are you more designing the program, or both, I guess?
So the medics come to me pretty much, I mean, they're pre-trained as far as, they went to through the EMT course, they go to paramedic school. So they're trained in that sense. So really what I'm doing is I'm providing them with left and right limits of how to apply that practice in the tactical environment. These are things, here's something you would normally, I don't want a finger stick glucose on everybody, obviously, right?
Yeah.
I don't care if you carry a C collar, things of that nature. This is how to work out of a bag instead of working out of a truck. These are the tactical considerations. And it's not, it's kind of like it's kind of like somebody who I've seen guys that are a brown or black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then the first time they try to apply that in a self-defense situation, they're a little bit lost. It's not because they don't have the necessary skills. It's because it's a little bit of a different environment.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the medics. It's, I tell them in training, I'm like, you have all the necessary skills. I'm just going to teach you how to do those, translated differently. It's kind of like all line dances are the same, just the song's different.
Okay, fair enough. No, fair enough. Go ahead.
So I'm trying to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. You are providing them with what to do in these tactical situations. Now, we're saying that this is something that is across, somebody, no matter where you're at, what jurisdiction they're operating off under somebody else's license. But there aren't doctors who have the experience on the tactical side of the house like you do with the medical side. So how are they being able to provide this type of training without missing that piece?
Yeah. And so I'm
sorry.
I'm trying to, no. That's an excellent question. And I knew we were going to get to it, but it's always in kind of how I word my answer. So
right.
The problem, okay. So tactical medicine in the civilian world, in the law enforcement world, is not a direct reflection of, it's not a carbon copy of what we do in the military. And it can't be for a number of reasons. That's a 3-hour conversation in and of itself. It's heavily influenced by that. TECC is heavy, tactical emergency casualty care is very similar to tactical combat casualty care, which is what the military does, but they're not exactly the same, right? There's a lot of things about it are different, especially in the evacuation phase, but also in the tactical phase, also in a lot of the things that you have to consider for that. There's never been a real proponency, because on the military side, the TCCC committee is the proponency, right? They dictate these are the things that should be done in each phase, whether that's care under fire, whether, that's the evacuation phase. These are all the things that should be done. This is the scope of practice based on who you are, what your level of training is, and where you find yourself in the continuum of combat, right?
Yeah.
TCCC publishes something, and that's basically law, right? That's everybody's going to do it that way. They have teeth. The biggest difference between TCCC and TECC is TECC really doesn't have teeth. They can't say, if one of my medics does something that they're not supposed to, nobody's going to raise this up to the TECC committee for review unless we voluntarily go in there and ask them, hey, this is what we did. Can we get some very informal feedback from you guys on this? And I've never been on the TECC committee, but I've been on multiple advisory boards for TECC. So and I used to go to, both meetings every year. So I'm very familiar with how they operate and what they can and can't do. NTOA, National Tactical Officers Association, has kind of stepped up and tried to be a proponency in this, but it's really difficult. And probably the biggest obstacle to it is because people have been kind of making this up on their own for decades.
Yeah.
People have been doing it different ways.
Right.
And at the end of the day, and this is it's unfortunately, it ends up being a little bit of an ego thing. Nobody wants to get up in front of a room and admit that they've been doing it wrong for 30 years. Right.
No.
So there's a lot more politics involved. So the idea of everybody agreeing to kind of surrender and go, yes, we're going to let this organization be the gold standard and we're going to do exactly what they say, that's probably never going to happen. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast. But, other things that play into it, it's like if you look at an infantry platoon at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, aside from the fact that they're jumping out of airplanes, they're not a whole lot different from an infantry platoon at Fort Hood, Texas.
Okay.
Right? There's a lot, They went to the same basic training. They use the same manuals for what they do. Their tactics, techniques, and procedures are mostly the same. They go to the same schools for maintenance. It's not that, but now let's say, so let's look at the Sheriff's Department in Travis County, Texas versus the Sheriff's Department in Bullitt County, Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not the same.
No.
Yeah.
The populations they serve are vastly different.
Yeah.
Their manpower, vastly different. Budgets, vastly different.
Yeah.
The terrain in which they operate, the jurisdictions, the neighboring jurisdictions, and what overlaps with them. It's all so different. So I don't think, people have asked me, I get asked this all the time, and probably at least every couple years, I'll get this weird email or a message on social media. Hey, man, we're really going to do it now. We're getting a bunch of people together. We're once and for all, we're going to set this up and there's going to be a gold standard moving forward. And I always go, okay, yeah. All right. Hey, a week before the meeting, you let me know and I'll be there. And then I never hear from them again. And that's
what you're talking about.
Probably always going to be that way.
Yeah. What you're talking about expands much larger than that. I mean, not just the medical side and the tactics side, but, reporting, it's like every department has to have their own thing, their own way. And again, different budgets, all the things that you described. But it's interesting to hear that on the TAC medic side.
But it's not, even,
I feel like it shouldn't be that way.
Funny side story.
Yeah.
And this, and things may have changed. So, I'm speaking, from institutional knowledge here.
Yeah.
Right. Even in the tier units, and I'm not talking about the difference between CAG and Dev Group. I'm talking even within CAG, right? Even within Delta. One squadron would tap, the other squadron would squeeze before they made entry, right?
Right.
It's like, is it a tap or is it a squeeze, right?
Yeah.
We can't even get people in the same unit to agree on that, right?
Fair enough.
So the odds of me, and, I'm an NTOA instructor and I go all over the country and all over the world. I've taught for NTOA in Dubai. You can't go into a place that's been doing it a certain way for a certain amount of time. They already have a medical director. They got a senior medic that's been doing this for 15 years and go, that's great. But because I'm here today, from now on, you're just going to do it this way.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because I don't know what kind of, bad outcome you had 2 years ago that influenced that. I don't know, about the guy who was a Navy corpsman, who was the backbone of your organization for years. And he showed you guys all this cool way, to do this. And you guys are comfortable doing that. And that's just what's expected. I don't have that institutional knowledge. So it's the best that we can do at the high level with organizations like TECC and NTOA is just kind of provide examples of best practices and then hope that everybody kind of gets on board.
Slight bunny trail, but to your point, we talked with Francois, who was he's the deputy national director for the French police, and he was like, "Yeah, we taught chokes up until like 5 years ago." Mo and I both our jaws dropped because for at least my entire career, it's like absolutely under no circumstances. He's like, "No, it works so well." And I was like, "Oh, it definitely does.
It works great. It's safe." So here's it. I know we're not here to talk about that.
Okay.
But I am and you know this. I'm also a DT instructor with 2 to 3 different organizations, depending on how you count it.
You got more jobs than I've ever known, bro.
I know it's an attention span issue. I used to say this all the time. I'm like, if if we teach the rear naked choke in kids class and let them do it in competition, I don't see any reason that we can't teach law enforcement to do it safely. But somebody brought up a really good point that, the 6-year-old little girl has more mat time than most officers on patrol.
Oh,
which is true.
That's a true point.
Doc, you're going to get me going because training, and it's like they
100%.
train the shit out of you for like 3 to 6 months, depending on the agency, and then it just goes poof. It just
goes away.
20-year career, you may never do it again.
It's been my experience, and I've worked with full-time teams. I've worked with part-time teams. And I don't care if you're talking about a full-time team. It's a full-time team gets a little bit more leeway, right? But, it's that being said, when you're a full-time team, we all know what ends up happening is your organization just finds more stuff for you to do.
Yep.
Right.
You feel like you're not doing enough.
Think in theory, the full-time team translates to more training time. In practice, that's not exactly what happens.
It does not. Because training time, it's not tangible.
Yes, exactly. It's not tangible and it's barely billable, right? Like you got to fight to get paid for your training time.
Yeah.
It's insane.
In the military, in a Ranger battalion, in a special forces group, in a tier unit, you have cycles, right? And you have a cycle where you deploy, where you're doing your job. You have a cycle where you're doing, refit and support type stuff, and you have a training cycle. And in law enforcement, you're constantly flying the plane while you're building it.
Yes.
Right? You're trying to squeeze
100%.
in. Yeah. And then you look at the guys that are on these part-time SWAT teams, they're working 3 jobs, right? They're a patrol officer, they're a SWAT operator, they're maintaining training in both of those things, right? Okay. Oh, and by the way, we haven't even mentioned that they're probably also a father, maybe coaching a soccer team.
All the other things.
Yeah. And there's so many hours in a day and there's so many funds in the coffers to pay for all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I'm loving this conversation because training is my thing.
Well,
so
let me just touch on that because I'll tell you, even so Secret Service, when you're on the detail, you do 2-week rotations. With your 4th rotation, it's supposed to be 2 weeks of training. So you're supposed to constantly, that's when you do your gun qualification, your DT, you do tactics, protect, whatever it is. And I could tell you I was only on the detail for 2 years, but in those 2 years, I think I made it to 2 trainings because it doesn't work that way. You're always traveling, you're advancing, people call it's like, hey, if you could just give me the schedule that I'm supposed to have, this could work because I could have 2 weeks to just do what I need to do. And you know how it is. Also, that's when you go to the doctor's appointment, get your dinner, just live your life a little bit, but it doesn't ever work out that way. To your point, Mo, it's not tangible. And then, Doc, to your point, it's like, they need a body. You got to go there. So it just doesn't work out that way.
Training only becomes tangible when something bad happens and they have to pull your training record out to say, wait, no, this is what they've done. That's the only time. Otherwise, it's going to constantly be pushed on the back burner because, well, we can put these people here. We got these bodies for this, especially in law enforcement. Like you said, they're always trying to spread law enforcement between 3 jobs because they are constantly doing more with less. So I want to go back a little bit when you were talking about not putting everything under one umbrella. And one of the things when I was in training that we would run into is some agencies did not want to certify their people or have everything come under an umbrella because of liability. Well, if they're certified in it, now we've got to be able to defend it. Is that something you ran into, or is it just strictly what you were saying earlier?
No, I've seen that. I've seen, a great example I was mentioned, NTOA comes out with best practice guidelines. But when you look at the best practice guidelines, if you say, yes, we're going to commit to that, to be a certain level of SWAT team, you have to do maritime operations.
Oh,
not everybody has the capacity and the time and the resources to do maritime operations. So, and I've had these conversations on the local level and on the NTOA level. And then NTOA, and I don't say this in not in a bad way, they're perfect. They're very much aware of the fact that this is basically going to eliminate some people from the possibility of them being certified. But you mentioned liability, Mo. It's also liability for them, for NTOA, right? Because if they say this is the standard, right, they can't lower this, they can't, hey, 80% of organizations didn't meet that standard. Well, then we're going to have to lower the standard. They can't do that.
Yeah.
So they would rather say, hey, we kept the standard here and only 20% of departments met that standard, which means that's only 20% of the departments that have the potential for calling us and saying we need to provide expert witness because X, Y, or Z happened. But yeah, there's anything with training is because all of the things that we're told, this is true in the military and law enforcement, right?
Mhm.
All of the things from a training standpoint and equipment standpoint, that it's very much a two-edged sword. These are all things that we're getting to do our jobs better. But those are also the nails that they will put you on the cross with later. Because they'll hold that up, right?
Yeah.
And you guys, I'm sure, have seen this. It says right here, you were trained in this. Right.
Yeah.
It says right here, you recertified in this twice a year. So explain yourself. So it is a double-edged sword.
It's interesting you said that because I was very resistant when they started giving everybody Narcan. And this was in the early days when it was like, hey, use this. And I'm like, I'm not doing that because if I do it wrong or they die, or I'm like, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. And I was very resistant. And then it was like, well, if you have it and you don't use it, you could be, I was like, bro, what the, how is this possible? And again, this is the early days. I'm sure there's
that's why a few thousand diabetics got Narcan last year.
Well, that's a whole nother thing. I will say this: during my time as a beat cop, I had to learn. And again, I'm not a medical professional, never been trained, whatever. But you kind of learn the difference between someone who's drunk and someone who's like in diabetic shock. Not everybody knows that, and I've seen people get treated as drunks at DUIs. And it's like that dude's about to like he needs orange juice, and they're like, "Well, he's being an asshole." I was like, anyway, to your point, yes. Like, how do you even begin to recognize that, right? I mean, you're just Narcanning diabetics.
I left the career field just before Narcan became a big thing, so I never thought about that. That's probably happening crazy.
But it's thankfully a lot of the fears around Narcan are kind of overstated.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if you're given the dose that you have available as a patrol officer of the intranasal. There used to be much more of a concern that Narcan had the potential to trigger a seizure. And that's, I cannot, as an honest scientist, I can't say that's been completely debunked, but it's been largely debunked.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's not, that's why if, times that I've been working in the ER and somebody's come in, a diabetic came in and got Narcan, or, a drunk came in and got Narcan, I don't beat anybody up over that at all. Yeah. It's, hey, with the tools you had available, you made it's, I don't ever judge somebody for making a 6-second decision because they didn't have the 6 years of knowledge behind it. Right. It's the same when a police officer gets blamed because they show up on scene and what they saw as they got out of a car was, hey, this is a life or death situation and I need to engage. And then, somebody tries to Monday morning quarterback it. It's like, well, you don't know that what that person was going through. And it's like, I had 6 seconds of knowledge
to make a decision.
I wasn't riding around with that person for the past 2 days while they were going through that. I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You have to make the best decision, based on the knowledge that you have and based on the training that you have.
You brought up a memory for me, and I'm going to explain the story, and then I just want to maybe try to turn it into a question, because it's something that it was actually during my time in Hillsborough when there was an individual who got put in solitary confinement. I think it was for like 48 hours. They thought he was drunk. He was being very, rude, disrespectful, non-cooperative, all these things. Turned out he was having a stroke, or he had a stroke, or however you want to phrase it.
I was going to say, it's sometimes when somebody's just being an asshole, it's a frontal lobe seizure.
Well, so again,
it's rare. You see it.
Very rare, right? And I remember when this happened, and I remember this the mass of everybody going, "What a fucking idiot!" How did it? But I'm like, would you know what a fucking stroke looks like? And everybody gets quiet. I'm like, and dude, they got blasted in the media. Like, I felt awful. Mm-hmm. The amount of stuff that you get trained to learn, right? The amount of training and what is expected of frontline officers, let's just phrase it that way, is just so vast. And then you start getting into these nuanced medical things, which maybe as a medical professional, you're like, oh, I could easily tell. But again, you're 22, 23, 24 years old. You've never seen this, and you've just dealt with 97 assholes who were just assholes. And then you get another guy and you don't recognize the difference. The question I'm posing to you is, Is there a way practically to
Mhm.
educate, combat that without those things turning into, I don't know that it made the national news, but it was definitely local. And I don't know what ended up happening to them, but I was like, how are these? You can't be a doctor, a therapist,
Mhm.
always on, geared up, ready for fight or flight, fight for your life, that type of stuff. And then also have all this nuance, like, oh, he had Langerhans, cytosis, I don't know any of this
All the
stuff. I'm just trying to
one-offs.
figure this stuff up,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there a way to
and
begin to
it's a
educate?
great. I just recently. It's a little bit off topic, but I think it kind of illustrates the point.
Yeah.
Do you guys follow Ryan Tillman at all?
I know who you're talking about. Yes. I don't follow him, but I know.
Ryan Tillman, hopefully the next governor of California.
Yep.
Former police officer.
That's why I heard him. He's been on a few podcasts. Yes.
He recently posted a video. I've been on Ryan's show before. He's a great guy, really knowledgeable. He's a great police officer, just an all-around great human being, and he'll be a great governor if the people of California choose to elect him. But he posted a video where a police officer arrived on scene and there's somebody laying there. It's like, oh, that's an injured person, so I'm putting gloves on. No, that was the person doing the injuring. And they were laying in the prone behind a car, and then they turned around and shot the officer, right? So, here you have an instance where the police officer, probably got out in his tactical parole officer mode, saw what he deemed to be a medical emergency, flipped that switch into first responder mode, putting gloves on.
Yep.
And the fact of the matter is all along it was still a tactical situation. So how do you train a human being for that? In combat we have rules of engagement, and nobody. I don't think I ever saw an incident in combat where people were held to as high a standard of decision making, post hoc after the fact as law enforcement officers are. That's when I went through a door in Iraq or Afghanistan, I didn't have to worry, this was not a DV situation, right? This was bomb maker's house. It's totally different.
Yeah.
People aren't going to judge me the way that law enforcement is judged. It's challenging. It is. And I understand as much as we all cringed at hey, we should be sending social workers, not police officers. I totally understand the spirit of that argument, and the spirit of that argument, in theory, that's 100% the right thing to do. But how do you do it safely? How do you determine that 100% this is not a shooting situation? And the reality of that is, to 100% determine that, you have to go through every room in the house and search everybody involved and everything else. You can't just do it at a glance. You can't just take somebody's word for it. How many videos have we seen where it's like, oh, it's okay, we're just arguing.
And then it goes,
and then there's, everything, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we're fine. No. Oh my God. Oh, I called 911 on an accident. And then there's gunfire 30 seconds later.
Yeah.
Right. It's complex. It's an incredibly complex situation. This is why reason number 147, why law enforcement officers are incredibly underpaid because of having to deal with this.
Oh yeah.
It's, you just never know. Every patient that rolls through the door, I don't know what's going on, but the patients typically aren't trying to hide their diagnosis from me either.
That's a valid point. That's a good point.
They might not be 100% honest about their level of pain or about how much of their pain medication they're taking, right? But I'm still generally in the ballpark.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody comes in saying I have a cold and then pulls up their pant leg and there's a knife sticking out. That's never happened.
No, very true. Well,
it's true. We're held to the highest standard with the least amount of information when we make the decision.
Yes.
It's incredible.
I know we're getting a little off topic. Do you mind if we stay on it for just a few minutes? Because you're making some very good points, Doc. And again, you have that unique experience of both being highly trained, highly skilled, assaulting in those tactics and that understanding,
high
but also
tactical knowledge.
Yeah, but also the medical side, and so I feel like your perspective is very unique. And so, if you will indulge me for just a moment, that understanding, because I was talking to BJ, and I've actually talked to Mo about this a few as well, especially now with the overwhelming presence of the media, and I'm not trying to get into that, but they'll be like, why was there 7 agents in the SWAT team and they raided my house and they did it at this time? And it's like they just seem so baffled, and every cop goes, yeah, that's one, for your safety, because people know that bad guys tend to not want to fight you if there's 12 of you as opposed to just one-on-one. And there's a lot of reasons behind it, but it's like they never go to that next step and explain why. It's just always like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. They're awful. They're terrible. But on the flip side, it's like, oh, this horrific tragedy happened. There was a time in Hillsborough where there was gangs where they were not using guns, they were using machetes. And I remember like dudes would have hands cut off, arms stabbed, whatever, and you're trying to investigate. And they're like, I'm not talking to you. They wouldn't want to help you. And so it's like, oh, the cops don't care about us. They don't care about this community. It's like, they don't want to cooperate. You see what I'm saying? So it's like this perception gets pushed out and there's just no follow-up or no educating on what is actually happening. And maybe people don't care. And that seems to be how I feel. But what I'm trying to articulate is there has to be a way to push that out or educate, not just law enforcement, but also the public. Are you seeing anything like that? I mean,
yeah, we see there's efforts coming from multiple sides of the equation, and I would, maybe I'm being over generous, but I always feel like 80% of those are good faith, right? That, people that, no matter which side they're on, they're saying what they're saying in good faith. I think, body cams, I think, have been immensely helpful, right? It at the same time adds a level of stress and reduces a level of stress, right? But I think at the end of the day, I think body cams are going to weed out some bad apples, which is what we needed them to do, right?
100%. Yeah.
That was, that's what it was pushed for the most, and it is going to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Which is great. I think it's also going to change a lot of people's perception about what law enforcement is like. I know it's certainly done that for me.
Yeah.
I've been law enforcement adjacent for quite some time, but I'll watch, I'm addicted to body cam video. I'll watch it nonstop. And I learn something new every day. And at the same time, it's like almost I feel like everybody I see on a body cam video has never watched YouTube themselves.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, I know how this is going to end. You don't know. You're literally the only person involved here who doesn't know how this is going to end. Right? Because we all know how this is going to end. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is as far as I came up with an idea years ago. I think there needs to be your junior year of high school. There needs to be a mandatory class, just like I had to take driver's ed and I had to take health and all this other stuff. I think you need to have a class. Maybe they can work it into a civics class where you do not just one, you do like a week's worth of ride-alongs and you really see what people do. And I think doing a week's worth of ride-alongs, maybe even split that between, law enforcement and fire and first responders.
Yeah.
So people can really have an appreciation for what this is like. Just like I think everybody should work in the restaurant business for at least.
Speaking my language, brother. I agree.
About interfacing with people, like the restaurant business. I know a former hospital head of nursing who told me once that she said, and every time I interview a nurse for a job, I ask if they have ever worked waiting tables. And if they say, oh, yes, and I hated it, I don't hire them. Yeah. She said, because she goes, granted, it's not a great job. Yep. She goes, but I want to hire somebody that tells me how much they learned about people and themselves in doing that job. She goes, if all they do is talk about how much they hated it, they don't interact with people very well. Right. Yeah. She goes, because you're going to have to interact with, interacting with doctors is like interacting with the kitchen. Right. Yep. And interacting with patients is like interacting with the customers at your table. And you have to learn how to be, because at the end of the day, the nurse is the face of the hospital, right? The nurse is who the patient spends the most time with. That's who they see. And again, we're getting a little bit off track here, but I think too many people live in their bubble. They don't try to see things from other people's point of view, whether 100%. That's, the police officer pulling you over. Yeah. Or, the person getting pulled over that you see on the news, right? You need to look at everything from every possible angle. And, I got pulled over just recently. I got a little bit of a lead foot and I was picking up my son at Texas State. And there's this one area in town there that I have no idea why the speed limit is so low. But I'm not blaming that. It was me. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah. And I got pulled over. And as soon as I did, I knew, I'm like, okay, I must have been going over. And I did and I told my son, my my 18-year-old sitting next to me. He doesn't even have a driver's license yet. We won't get into that, but so he's never been pulled over. So I told him, I said, watch this whole interaction, and I put my hands up on the wheel. I was respectful. I didn't try to question anything. I handed over my license. I said, do you want me to, I told him I have a firearm. It's on my right hip. Here's, and the police officer he said, as soon as I said, I do have a firearm, I have a license to carry. And he goes, hey man, this is Texas. He goes, I assume every car has at least one gun in it.
Damn right.
So yeah, which it probably does. Right.
Florida's the same way.
The interaction was short. It was respectful and we were very quickly on our way. And I blame social media for 90% of what's wrong with the world. Right. It's, people think that actions don't have consequences anymore. People have started to see other people as just these little blurbs on social media. It's kind of dehumanized them. Even politics aside, they don't see people as other people anymore. They see them as 140 characters of something they disagree with. And, everybody wants to argue. Everybody wants to, troll the chodes and whatever else the kids are saying this week. And it's a problem. And we're going to continue to pay for it as a society till we fix ourselves. This isn't the first time we've gone through something like this, and it won't be the last. So
no, for sure. Mo, get us back on track. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
I am.
But Doc, just to say this, Mo has heard me say people like law enforcement, like, oh, we need to recruit college and football. And I'm like, yeah, so does every other industry in the entire world. And I'm like, you should be looking at customer service, like waiting to restaurant stuff, whatever, anything engaging with customer service. I was like, because you learn how to speak to people. And that is like the number one thing in law enforcement, period, at the end. So to hear you say that, I'm laughing because I'm like, I've been saying that for a while.
And it's right. It's 100% right.
Yeah.
Sorry, go Mo.
When I interviewed for the unit, they asked me in the interview, they said, what's the worst job you ever had and why? And what's the best job you ever had and why? And that tells you a lot about people, how they answer a question like that.
No, for sure. Yeah. I love it.
So I wanted to go back to like your training aspect and get some clarity on that part of it. So, and Tyler kind of touched on that you have like 19 jobs. So you
all good though.
All good jobs. But so you are still a practicing physician working at a hospital, and then
I'm just working urgent care now. I wanted to take a break, and this is really helpful for me while I'm trying to be a novelist. So I work in an urgent care that's literally a mile from my house. But yes, I'm still seeing patients.
And then do you create, and I know you said you teach for the NTOA.
Mm-hmm.
NTOA. Do you also have your own training that you create for some of the agencies? Because I know you said you do it you're not on anybody's payroll or anything like that. Or do you have your own training that you create for the situations that you know are unique, is what I'm getting at.
Yes. And I've created some of the curriculum for NTOA as well. They actually revamped Jason Pickett, who's the medical director of NTOA, who's an outstanding emergency medicine physician. They actually did a deep dive and kind of revamped a lot of the curriculum this year. And I was so busy, I was unable to help with that. Because he goes, I'm only going to ask you to review the classes you wrote. And I'm like, I don't even have time for that. But the answer to your question, Mo, is yes, I do. We have a set plan that we do for I don't have to worry about it as much with my medics. I do a lot of kind of opportunity training with them. Like, what is it you guys want to learn? What do you guys feel is a weak point? What are you guys running into? What scares you going through that door? And that's what we'll talk about. That's what I do for them, because they're recertifying, on their national registry and on their, their state licensure and everything all the time. So I don't really need to have a lot in that. The big thing for me was setting up a biannual training program for the operators so that every other year they're going through a full 2-day TECC/TCCC course. It's basically every other year. So that way we catch, we get there's a selection to pick up some new operators coming up for us. And we just did the training in our 40-hour week this year. So they won't get trained next year, but they'll get trained the year after.
Got it.
So everybody trains on that. Then we do periodic training. The team trains 2 days a month. So we typically, at least one of those 2 days, will dedicate about a third to a half of that day to trying to work in some medical stuff. And the big thing for me, and I think this ended up being the most important thing, and this is what I told them when I got hired. I said, if you're not going to let me interject realistic medical training into all full mission profile tactical training, then I don't want the job, because I can sit you there with a wound cube all day long. I can sit you there with a tourniquet mannequin all day long in a classroom, whatever. I can run you through a CCCC course every other year. But if you're not in the habit of flipping that switch when you're going through doors, it's not going to matter. Because that was the big thing in the early days of the global war on terror that we found out is all of the units that were having good survivability were the units that did realistic casualty play in all of their tactical scenarios. And the thing is, a lot of in the military, a lot of units didn't want to do that because what does it do? It basically throws everything off, right? Is like, no. We were supposed to hit these beats and then exfil and then, and then pat each other on the back and high five, but if I throw casualties into it, now we gotta unpack litters and we're starting IVs and now I gotta call in this, the medevac asset was supposed to be notional. It wasn't supposed to be real, but now we got to really do it and all this other stuff. And they didn't want to do that. But the units that did, mostly the soft units, were very successful. And that is something that the teams that I work with do all the time is that training is real. So coming up with the training program for that. And I told them back when I got hired, I said, in an ideal situation, I'm basically going to work myself out of a job.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to make sure the medics know how to translate the knowledge they already have. I'm going to get them set up so they can teach the most important knowledge to the operators. I said, because we all know from all the data that it's not what I would do or not what the medic's going to do. It's what it's what you do in self-care and the person immediately next to you in the stack does. That's 98% of survivability.
100%.
So if we teach that and we teach that correctly and that's maintained, really we've kind of solved the problem.
Yeah.
So we're at the point now, and my schedule is such that I haven't had time to go to training with my team in probably 4 months. But again, I've been successful in my mission, which was basically to work myself out of a job, and they don't need me. And I tell people all the time, I said, be leery of the doctor who wants to go on every mission, because they're not necessarily there for the right reason. They're there because they want to pretend they're a SWAT operator. And I might get some hate for that, but it's what I feel to be true. They're not necessarily there for the right reasons. And before I was a SWAT doctor, I got approached by some people and they were like, hey, we want you to come up. We want to come up with a physical fitness test for SWAT doctors to take. For, if you're the medical director of a SWAT team, you have to, be able to, and it was some, you throw a sandbag over a wall this high and a bunch of other stuff. And I said, hey man, even Hawking could be the medical director of a SWAT team. There is no physical requirement. Oh my God, it's nice to have.
I get it.
Sure.
It's nice to have so you can go out and really see what people are doing. But it's not really a necessity.
Right.
I'm like, and I had the same guy who approached me about that. He'd been a SWAT physician for like 2 years. And I said, how often do you train your operators in tourniquets? He goes, I don't let my operators carry tourniquets. He goes, they don't need to. I'm always there.
No, I see what you're saying now. Now I'm tracking what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's not
And then
good.
I'm like, what if you have a death in the family or you go in the hospital?
Yeah.
Right.
Or something, I'm like,
Now they just bleed out.
yeah. I'm like, you need to be working to train yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
You need to know, I sleep just fine at night, knowing that if my guys are on a barricade somewhere and it goes south, they all know what to do. And they've shown me that not only in training, but in practical application. They've shown me that in real stuff. So, I feel that I did them a greater service by giving them that knowledge moving forward. Then, would it have been really cool to do an open thoracotomy on the back of the Bearcat? That'd be awesome to talk about. The person probably would have died anyway. But at the end of the day, that's not what's going to save lives.
Right.
Fair enough.
Now, that kind of leads me with my training. I've got with one agency, and they did bring a lot of folks that had military background with not law enforcement background. And there were some learning curves, I will say, just because things, like you said earlier, are very different in the military versus what we have to deal with on the law enforcement side. How are you able to take your Army training for all intents and purposes and overlay that and make those adjustments throughout? Is it just the way you kind of integrated yourself in the team, or what do you think lent to you being able to do that?
I had to be open to listen. It was probably the biggest thing and to recognize that the way that I did I came into it with a very open mind. And before I even really started to get into it, I started to look at just on my own. I was like, okay, well, what are the differences here going to be?
Yeah.
You know, what are the key differences going to be, you know, both tactically and medically? And the biggest thing that like jumped out at me is you're never, you know, because of aerial medevac assets, you're really never going to be, you know, farther away from, you know, than maybe 30 minutes from some level of trauma center. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for that reason, there was, you know, in the early days, and I saw this kind of right as I was getting into tactical medicine. And a great example is that individual who said that he didn't let his officers carry tourniquets. And he's like, oh, I don't want, you know, they shouldn't be carrying tourniquets. Well, I looked at it totally different. I'm like, okay, if we know that a tourniquet can stay on for 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours, and if nobody's ever farther away from a trauma center than 30 minutes, everybody should get a tournament.
Yeah.
So just do it. Just put a tourniquet on every extremity, you know, and you're going to be okay with that, right? You're going to largely have good outcomes with that.
Right.
And I was fortunate at the time. I worked for a company that wanted me to go to a lot of these meetings and conventions. So that's when I started going to TECC and started seeing what they were stressing policy-wise. I had guys like Dr. Josh Bobko, Dr. Reed Smith, who would get up and give presentations and saying, hey, this is what the injury patterns are in mass shooting scenarios and in what law enforcement officers are going to see. And they're not, the injury patterns aren't the same as what we saw overseas. So I had to adjust what I was emphasizing in training, you know, based on that. But you always have to recognize if you know what you don't know, I think you're largely going to be successful. And I knew that there was a lot that I didn't know. And I looked for mentors early on, guys like Jim Vredes, who runs the Center for Tactical Medicine here in Texas, who taught me, you know, he's a guy who's never been in the military, and he's basically everything that he knows about tactical medicine, he's had to seek out that knowledge on his own, but he had an invaluable amount of knowledge when it comes to how that applies in a law enforcement scenario. Yeah. And those were the guys that I turned to ask questions of, to kind of figure this whole thing out. Because, you know, somebody who comes out of the military and says, okay, well, this is how we did it. This is how TCCC does it. So this is just how we're going to do it. They're going to fail. Yeah. They're going to fail. So you have to be open to the environment, you know, the personnel, the budget, the equipment, you know, and all these other, you know, confounding variables that are going to make things different.
100%. That was some of the things, the hurdles that we encountered was these individuals were coming out of the military. And like you mentioned, an example, they were used to having training cycles, and we don't have those, you know, and they wanted to commit our people and assets to doing certain things that just weren't feasible because we had lack of training. It wasn't going to be possible. So it was, you know, one of those things that like I said, it took a little bit of a learning curve to get them to where we needed to be. But I think a lot of it was these individuals had bigger egos, and they thought they knew a lot more stuff because they had great careers in the military, but it didn't directly translate, and they didn't realize that, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tyler, I kind of stepped on you.
The irony is I even saw when I was in 7th group, and, you know, in 7th group, it's our whole job to go and train people, right? To be force multipliers. And I saw guys in 7th group that still didn't get, you know, it's, the people that we're training are not the U.S. military, right? They're not going to have, if I went right now to Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, and I had an infantry soldier dump out their rucksack, there may be one pair of socks in there, maybe. Okay.
That's true.
If I go to Fort Bragg or Fort Hood and have an infantry soldier dump out their rucksack, they're going to have like 6 pairs of socks. They're going to have a pair of socks for every day they're in the field, right? Yep. And that's a microcosm of the difference.
Right.
I had a 7th group medic was supposed to be training medical staff officers on how to do medical planning. And I found out that he was training them directly from the U.S. field manuals. So when he was telling them, okay, when you're going into an area and you need to do a medical intelligence assessment, you're going to send a request through USAMRIID, and they're going to give you an intelligence summary of the area. And I said, dude, a Colombian national cannot ask USAMRIID for intelligence. USAMRIID is going to hang up on him. And whoever answered the phone at USAMRIID probably doesn't even speak Spanish anyway. I said, no, that's not an option. I said, we need to be teaching them how USAMRIID forms these medical intelligence estimates. Not call USAMRIID and get your intelligence estimate. That's what there's so many things in the military that you kind of take for granted.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
That, the chow truck's going to be there. The helicopter, somebody took care of them. There being a helicopter, right? Things like that.
Oh, that's so true.
Very
Doc,
true.
I want to be respectful of our time, and I want to get a few things, but you talked about you have trained or worked with foreign, clarify, law enforcement for the med stuff, or was it military?
Yeah, so I've trained law enforcement. I've trained law enforcement in Costa Rica, in Bolivia, in the United Arab Emirates, and a couple other places. Yeah.
2-part question. 1, were they receptive? And 2, what were some of the biggest either pros and cons that you saw in those departments? You can summarize. You don't have to go line by line, but just in general, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little bit in the countries where I train them. It was a little bit different because these were the best example. So Costa Rica it's a police force, but it's kind of a paramilitary because they don't have an army. So it's kind of like an army. They wear fatigues every day and everybody has a rifle issued and everything else. Yeah. Pretty similar with Bolivia. I was working with a couple of Bolivian units that were like higher level. Think of them as kind of a national level SWAT asset type thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Very receptive. I mean, this is 7th group has a reputation in South America, and we've been teaching down there for so long. So a lot of them are very receptive to that. I train police officers in UAE, specifically on tactical medicine, and again, very receptive. They recognize that this is something that's really important for them, and they need to really lean heavily on the outside expertise. There's a lot of expats that work for law enforcement organizations in the UAE, and those are usually the individuals who are instrumental in bringing in these outside assets to train them. Because the great thing about UAE, anybody who's ever been over there, is they literally have like unlimited funding. Yeah. So it's the concept of flying 4 NTOA instructors over to Dubai business class is like where do we sign for that type thing?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I will say some of those countries, to your point, because I've worked with them in the Secret Service, you begin to see the vast differences when the UAE, European countries, things like that, where they have massive budgets or whatever, however you want to phrase it. And then you work with somebody like, Honduras, Vietnam, things like that. And you're like, those uniforms don't fit those. You just start to see like little nuance differences, but then the level of training. So it fascinates me that, the countries that reach out and they recognize the need for training and then the receptiveness for the training. So it's just a little side thing that it's interesting to me because I understand the military side, but for law enforcement, especially medical, life-saving, it hasn't been my experience with all countries that they give a shit. So it's good to hear that some do.
It's true. And it's not just in foreign law enforcement, foreign military, but it's getting people, if somebody's not excited about medical training, they're just never going to be excited about medical training.
That's very true.
Right.
Very fair. Yeah, very fair.
And I've had I have the opposite problem on my team because we have as a part-time team, we train 2 days a week, or I'm sorry, two days a month. And then we have a 40-hour week of training every year. And I think it was 2 years ago, we did our 40-hour week. And I said, hey, we're due to do medical training. So we front loaded that. I said, I'd like to front load it on the first 2 days so then I can continue to integrate it in all the tactical scenarios for the rest of the week. And they were like, yeah, great. So we did that and we continued to integrate all the training. And then when we did the full mission profile on the last day, my medics were getting pissed because they had nothing to do because we were having to pull operators off of the patient. And it's like,
they're
okay,
doing all their training stuff.
They're doing it.
No. I can still, I haven't put I'm going to put a junctional on. No. Yeah. Well, I still need a stable. No. The medic is here. Resume room clearing. Okay. We're good. But they were like so into it. It was like,
that's awesome.
Yeah. And it made me really happy. I'm like, I said, these are good problems to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's so good. Mo, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was getting ready to jump in and drive our train somewhere else.
No, go ahead. Drive it.
So, because I know, again, being respectful of his time, there's a couple things that I definitely wanted to touch on. One of them, when I did my dive into finding out about you, that you were on the History Channel on hunting Hitler. We got to talk about that. Another one of your million jobs. How do you land in that?
Yes.
And what was that about?
Yeah, so that was fun. It's so the way that came about is I was coming up on retirement. I hadn't retired yet. I was still on active duty. If you look at season 2 of Hunting Hitler, which was the first season I was on, I was still on active duty during that time.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I was on leave. So and part of that, I may or may not have had a country clearance for where we were. I'm not going to commit one way or the other.
Very well, sir.
What ended up happening was I was home one night, sitting on the couch, and my wife was next to me, and she was scrolling the socials. And my friend Tim Kennedy, who was on all 3 seasons, right?
Oh.
He had posted something on social media about, hey, we're looking for somebody, and these are the qualifications. And we're looking for somebody like this. And she read the qualifications off, and I'm like, well, I meet all those qualifications. And it's not, and even in the soft community, like not everybody would meet him necessarily. Huh. So I sent Tim a text. I go, hey man, Denise just showed me your post. I said, what's up? And he goes, send me your resume to my email. So I sent him the resume. He responded, CC'd me, but forwarded it to Karga, which was the production studio. And I ended up going through a pretty lengthy interview process. And so I'll give you the short version. Yeah. So 4 of us were up for the role. Myself and 3 other guys that had some type of soft background. I don't know who they were. Yeah. The other 3 got eliminated, but they still didn't give me the job because when the production company went to the History Channel, they said, and I'm paraphrasing here, can you find us a younger, taller, better looking version of this guy? So,
no,
damn it.
You can't get these skills with that package.
And I said, I don't think that person necessarily exists.
Nope.
I said, especially the younger part, because it took me a long time to do all this.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I said, I'm sure there's better looking guys, and Lord knows there's definitely taller guys, right? Because I'm only 5'6". But I said, all right, good luck with that. Let me know. So then they brought in a bunch of other guys, and they had a second round.
Oh my God.
And then I didn't get it.
Oh.
They gave it to a SEAL who was taller and better looking than me. Right? But then within an hour of them giving him the role, he had to back out of it. So they emailed me again, and they're like, is there any way you could do this? And I'm like, hey man, I'm going to have to apply for, not only am I going to have to apply for leave, but it's going to be overseas leave.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nut roll. I'm like, I'm like, you guys got to commit. Like, I got to know now.
Yeah.
And what I didn't tell him was my passport had expired. My civilian passport had expired. So I was also waiting on an expedited passport that arrived literally the day that I needed it.
Oh my gosh.
So that's how I got to do that. And then I went over, I got hired to do 3 episodes. I went over, I worked with James Holland, who is amazing. There is the best World War historian in the world, not just in the UK. I worked with him and an absolutely amazing team. The whole team was just outstanding. I love all those guys. And I did 3 episodes, and I think it was after I had shot, 1 or 2. We had a down day, and we were sitting. I was on a little beachside hotel in Spain. Yeah, living really rough
life.
With a glass of whiskey and a cigar. Yeah. And the director says to me, he goes, "Hey, you want to do 2 more episodes?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And he goes, "Okay." He goes, "I'm going to see if I can work this out." He goes, "Because he goes, the way that we're seeing the way the rest of the season is going to go, I think it'd be really great to have you and Tim together when we go to South America. I said, yeah, man, let me know. And took a little bit of time, but then they let me. And by that time I went on leave, shot 3 episodes, went back, I cleared Fort Hood and retired. And I was on leave again. I was on what they call terminal leave. And then about a week into terminal leave, they said, hey, can you go to South America and do a couple more episodes? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I got time off from the hospital, and I was on terminal. And that was when I may or may not have told the Army that, hey, my leave address is no longer in Georgetown, Texas, but it's, going to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we went and shot the last 2 episodes, and then we did get picked up for a 3rd season. So I did the 3rd season as well. And I thought that was, for a while, I came up with some concepts for a couple other different shows. A couple of them I got some interest in, pitched some pilots here and there. There's a couple sizzle reels out there from shows that never got made. One I'm actually thankful never got made because the premise was interesting, but I can't believe I'm going to tell you this. The title of the show was going to be so cringe that I never would have lived it down for my entire life. It was called The Bone Doctor.
Nope.
Yeah.
Would have never lived that one down.
No. And I kept telling him, I'm like, can we just change, like, everything else is fine, but can we just change that? And they
nope.
So thankfully, that show did not get picked up.
You guys are killing me.
I almost wish it would have.
Yeah. So, but I'd be saddled with that for the rest of my life.
I know. We would have talked
you would.
about
You
it.
would be Doc Simpson.
I would have got introduced as the Bone Doctor himself. Right?
100%.
Yeah. Just not good for anybody.
Oh my God.
There was a concept that I came up with for a show called ERFR, which was going to be a combination of Expedition Unknown and 24 Hours in the ER. But I got interested, but then by that time, I was really tired of travel. And I said, you know what? It actually coincided with, I actually went in the early days of the Ukraine conflict. I went over to Poland and Ukraine for a little bit, and I got back, and the people at the production company are like, hey, are you ready to move forward with this? And I'm like, man, no. I'm like, I was just doing this for real, and I just don't feel like doing it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, it just wears on you. I'm like, I'm just going to keep my head down and just do normal stuff for a while. And I don't regret it because, it led me to, I probably, if I got caught up in the whole TV thing, I probably never would have started writing novels, which I really, really, really enjoy. And I could do it right here at home.
Yeah.
Eat breakfast with my wife and my bulldogs and come up here with a cup of coffee. And, I'm not worried about, is this 220 electricity or 110 electricity as I'm tentatively plugging something in somewhere in Lithuania. So,
so you sparked something. Let me ask you this, because during in the culmination of your career, medical, all that stuff, the ERFR, you just reminded me of something, because we would do hospital surveys in all the countries. Once again, I'm going to leave the first world stuff because they're all kind of similar, but then you go into what I would deem third world, and you're like, holy shit, how is this a hospital?
Yeah.
I won't name the countries. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I've been to countries where you walk in and there's fucking blood on the floor. Yeah. And it's just that the hygiene is not the same. During your, because you talked about doing your medical advances and stuff like that. Was that something that you guys would do as well? Would you ever utilize a foreign hospital for operations or anything, or you had your own command stuff?
Yeah. So, and I talked about USAMRIID earlier. So typically when I would go someplace, when I was deploying on active duty, I would have a whole packet that said everything from, these are the venomous snakes and this is the location of the antivenom in the area.
Yeah.
To, these are the hospitals, these are their capabilities, these are their phone numbers, these are, the directors and everything else.
Yeah.
And I would, whenever possible, I would always go there and, I would take a look around, and they always want to give you a nice little guided tour.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would, typically I would go, my junior and I would go. And for a good portion of my time on a team, my junior was a really outstanding medic, a guy by the name of Jeff Pouch, who became a warrant officer, and just an outstanding individual, really, really smart guy. And Jeff and I would kind of divide and conquer to where, while one of us was getting the dog and pony show, the other one would kind of sneak behind the scenes to see the stuff that you're talking about. And that's why I caution people all the time, it's especially here in Texas, you hear about people going to whether it's Mexico or Panama. I'm going to get lipo or a facelift or stem cell treatment or whatever.
Oh.
And I tell them this all the time. I'm like, the office and the lobby is not what the rest of the hospital looks like.
Correct.
Nope.
Your point. So I did counter surveillance. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had to clean up. Living in Texas, I've had to clean up some medical messes from, stuff that was mismanaged, south of the U.S. border. I'm talking about joint replacements with mismatched parts.
What?
Like that's okay. Yeah. They put a hip in your pelvis, but that's a shoulder joint they put on your femur. So that's why it's not working.
Fair enough.
That would make sense. So
wild.
I caution people all the time. It's, we call them developing countries for a reason. They're still developing. Yeah.
Bargain
and at the end of the day, you get what you paid for.
Yeah, I was going to say bargain basement medical treatment I'm just not up for. Dental treatment, anything like that. Nope. Yeah. Nope. I'm good.
Well, we've never actually talked about this, but I to Doc, jump in, but the shit that you would see, like you're in a hospital, what they call this is the hospital to go to. They're like in shorts and t-shirts. And I'm like, who's the patient? Who's the doctor? Oh, that's the doctor. I can't tell the difference. Like it's shit like that. Not that you have to be in uniform, but I'm like, it's wild. And Doc, I love hearing you say that because one of my jobs was counter surveillance. So while they're doing the dog and pony show, we would either be like the day before or after or whatever, but we would just basically get a vibe for what was going on. And you would see all of a sudden 100 people leave and you're like, oh, okay, this is how it usually is. There's like 3 people here, not fully staffed all the time. It's just little things like that. These little tricks are like, we're not going there ever.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Like because that's wild. Anytime you're visiting, especially at the caliber where you were operating, at Secret Service level, right? Yeah. They really want to put their best face forward, right? Yeah. And there are people there that day that they're in that hospital 2 days a year, and that was one of them.
Yeah,
right? And
those for sure. People, I'm serious.
Those are the people that you're meeting.
Yeah,
yeah, and it's sketchy. I mean, there's good, I've seen high level medical care in other countries, and I've seen some medical care in other countries that I'm like, I wouldn't even necessarily call this medical care. No. It's a little bit hit and miss, and it's. Nothing is ever the way it is on paper.
No.
It's, on paper. On paper. Oh, I see here they have 2 surgeons who trained at the Royal, who did a fellowship at the Royal Academy in Leeds, or they have this or they have that. And then you get there on the ground, it's so great example. Before there was a lot of chatter back and forth in the early days of the Iraq War that their hospital system is considered to be one of the best in that area of the world. And they have most of their physicians are trained in Europe. And then during the invasion, they had a general officer went with a medical team to one of these hospitals that, our ground forces had already passed. And so it was a secure area. So they were going in there and they're like, hey, we're all doctors, we're all colleagues. So we're going to go in there, we're going to see what they need. And they met with the guy who was the physician, the Iraqi physician who was the head of the hospital. And they said, hey, we can get you anything you need, and they were thinking, medicine, ventilators, whatever. They said, what do you need? And he said, I need honey. And they're like, they thought something was lost in the transition. They're like, I'm sorry, what? And he goes, honey. And they're like, why do you need honey? And he goes, we use it for kidney failure.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So, and I'm not now, honey does have medicinal purposes. Don't get me wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't think kidney failure is one of them. So,
I was going to say, I think it'll fix that though.
Yeah. No. This is one of those things where, again,
I'm not a doctor.
Yeah. On paper and in reality, it was, 2 totally different things.
Wow.
Wild. I might edit crazy. This, but I got to tell you this. When we were doing our Africa swing, everywhere we went, all the different countries we stopped by, I mean, the roads were just lined with police, security, things like that. But it was literally like this T-shirt that said security or police or something like that. And so I asked one of the drivers I was with, I was like, are all these people cops? Like, why are they standing on the side of the road? He goes, no, they asked for volunteers to stand and act as security and they're being paid. I was like, so those aren't really cops? He's like, no. I was like, oh, it's just all.
I got a T-shirt that says
all smoke and mirrors, baby. I'm like, that is so wild. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff. To your point, that's the kind of stuff they would do. Last thing, just to kind of wrap it up, we got to touch on it. Go, Mo, go.
got to touch on the fact that you said you talked about your creative juices when you started doing the television. So you were doctor, TV star, in the military, all these things. And we can tack onto that you are also an author. Can you tell us about that?
So my first kind of foray into authorship was I wrote a book called Honed: Finding Your Edge as a Man Over 40. So I wrote a men's health book based on all the questions people were already asking me.
Right.
And it did really well. I think I spent 6 weeks at number one in a category on the Amazon bestseller list.
Still number one.
To date, I've sold over 10,000 copies of that book, and it still continues to do pretty well. There's still no audio version, even though everybody keeps still asking me for it. I'll get to that one day.
Fair enough, sir. You got 18 other jobs.
And then as of June of last year, I'm a published novelist as well. So I wrote a book called The Last Dungeon Crawler, which is the first in a trilogy that so far is doing. I've sold around 600 copies of that and got some pretty good reviews. And I won a couple of literary awards that nobody seems to care about very much. But I really enjoyed the world building. I love making up stories. I was fortunate to have parents that nurtured my imagination, from a very young age when I was putting toilet paper boxes on my head and pretending it was a space helmet. So I'm going to finish this trilogy, and then I've got a couple of more series in mind after that I'm hoping that moving forward, I can put out a novel a year. That's going to be kind of my goal moving forward.
Let me tell you this, as a fan, I appreciate that, because there's authors who will write 2 or 3 books and then won't write another fucking book for 10 years. And you're like, you son of a bitch. So
you mean like George R.R. Martin has been
I wasn't going to say his name, but yes, that
12 years, 3 months and 17 days, something like that.
Who's counting?
So there's a website where you can go and it says like exactly how long he's been working on it.
That's great. I just find it so intriguing though, because we, from just in this conversation, what we started with to now ending with, that you are, so creative in the most of the time you don't find someone who's scientific and creative. They usually don't go together. So it's, to me, incredibly intriguing. And to have you writing something that is fiction, you might have someone who is a writer that's in this world, I would say, law enforcement, first responder type world. You don't typically get that kind of personality or that piece of personality. So that's why I wanted to kind of touch on it.
No, well, I'm pretty sure both my parents took a lot of drugs. So.
Hey.
Hey.
I don't know how much, if any of that was Tylenol, but
it worked.
I like model trains and grilled cheese sandwiches. I don't know.
I love it.
I love it. Doc, let me just end by saying this. Just give me my little time. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your perspective, but you're such a fascinating individual, human being. Just to hear your story over the course of 2 podcasts and also just to read your work. It's such a dichotomy. Not that I'm asking you how can I define this individual? I don't know how to define you. And I think that's an okay thing. You're an assaulter. You're a bad motherfucker. You also just seem to be able to adapt to, new experiences. But then to hear you say on this episode that you're like, I knew enough that I needed to shut up and listen and learn when you had all this pedigree already. That's a level of humility that, again, I think I'm still trying to find, to be honest with you. So to hear all these things and to hear you say that and to hear your passion for what you're doing, I really appreciate it, man. It's one of those positive components to this that I truly enjoy. And I'm very happy, 1, that I've met you, but 2, that I've been able to have this time with you. So I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to me. And I've tried to be a lifelong learner. Sometimes it's easier said than done. The quest continues. I'm always interested. So just the other day, I found out that lemons are a man-made construct. They do not occur naturally. That totally rocked my world. And I found that at 59 years old.
That's going to rock my world now, because I'm going to go look that up and be like, that's crazy.
A hybrid between a lime and a certain variety of orange. Apparently it goes back to like 1,000 years BCE somewhere in India, but nobody's quite sure.
Yeah.
But the point was, this was all on a joke Instagram post. It said, therefore, life cannot give you lemons because lemons are a man-made construct.
Oh, I like that. Let's go. Let's go.
That's
dropping knowledge. I love it. Perfect. Doc, anything you want to end with? I appreciate you, brother.
No, just thank you for your time, Mo. It was great to meet you, and thanks
Very
for
nice
having
to meet
me back,
you,
Tyler. I really, really enjoyed it.
Dude, awesome. All righty, guys.